Hey folks, we're here at Tri-Tools Rancho Cordova facility. Today we'll be going over the 214-906 full function miter mandrel. It comes in this kit right here, and when you open up this box you'll find the manual with the instructions on assembly and operation. You'll find your hub here. You'll find your indicator hub, your mag base with indicators. Also find an assortment of jack legs, jack spacers, an assortment of jack screws. This here is an extension plate for the full function miter mandrel. This allows you to get out to a larger diameter. So the first thing we're going to do when we open up this case is we're going to grab our hub here and we're going to check to make sure that our parallel offsets right here at the top are centered. If they're not centered, these set screws on the side are push set screws. They will push these plates towards center. So I'll loosen up one and I'll tighten the opposite in order to center it. So once we have that centered and the set screws snug, I'll check to make sure that my gimbal gap here is square. If it's not square, in order to adjust, you loosen up one of the gimbal bolts and tighten the opposite. This will pull that gap into square. So just a visual square before you start assembling the entire hub and installing it inside the pipe you're working with. So once everything's square and centered, I want to make sure that this jam nut here at the top isn't too loose or too tight. It's just as snug. That way, when I go to assemble this, everything moves freely. So once you have this all adjusted, pull out your hook and you'll look at the assembly instructions. So this full function miter mandrel here will mount in an ID range of 4.75 inch ID all the way to 29.75 inch ID. So you need to know what size pipe we're working with today. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to grab a tape measure. I'm going to measure the inside diameter of the pipe we're working with. So the ID of this pipe is 12.25 inches. So I can look in this manual and find my ID range of 11.25 to 13.5 inches. And that requires a jack screw part number of 13-1415, which are actually already assembled on these jack legs right here. And a spacer part number of 44-0220, which are right here. So there'll be 8 of these assemblies that you'll put together, threading the jacks into the jack spacers and threading them into your hub. Once you have assembled your full function miter mandrel to this point, you've threaded in all 8 jack legs and jack screws. You can use a wrench to tighten all 8 legs. To do so, I like to take this bearing hub right here, turn it upside down, just like so. Now, use my wrench to tighten all 8 legs. So once you've assembled your full function miter mandrel and tightened all 8 jack legs, you're ready to install it in the pipe. Before you do so though, it's always a good idea to take a tri-square and a soapstone or Sharpie and mark a line 3 inches in, which I've already done here. This makes it easier and faster to rough square. So once we scribe our line, we're going to go back to our full function miter mandrel here. We're going to make sure that our jack screws aren't threaded out too far. By too far, I mean that the overall width in between screws isn't greater than the pipe size. So currently I'm sitting at 12 inches. And this pipe is 12¼ inches, so I know this will fit inside the pipe. So once I do that, I can measure the stick out of a single jack screw, which is about 1¼ inch, and I can check every single one of them to be sure that they are threaded in far enough. And they're all looking good. Now we're ready to put the full function miter mandrel inside the pipe. When I put it in, I want to be sure that my gimbal bolt, one gimbal bolt, is at 12 o'clock. This is so that when you hang a heavy machine on here, if it does sag, it makes it easier to pull it back up into place. So when I put it in, I want to set my front jack screws right on that scribe line that I made, and by hand slowly thread out the jack screws to make contact with the ID of this pipe. Like so. Now that we're loosely in the pipe and we have one gimbal bolt at 12 o'clock, I can take a scale and I can rough square my full function miter mandrel. To do so, I'll measure from the face of the pipe to each jack leg. So I'll measure from here and go opposite, and that needs to be within 1/16 of an inch. Once you rough square it, the next is to rough center it. To rough center it, I'll take my scale and I'll measure from the ID of the pipe to the square edge of each jack leg and make sure each one of those are within 1/16 of an inch. After you've rough squared and rough centered, the very next step is to take your 9/16 wrench and tighten every single jack screw. You want them tight enough to leave a dimple inside the pipe. Remember, you'll be hanging a heavy machine on this. You don't want it to move while you're cutting. Once you've tightened all 8 jack legs, the very next step is to install your indicator hub here. So this goes on the draw rod. You got 4 dowel pins that line up to the mating holes. You've got a long nut right here that threads on that draw rod. You want to make sure to snug that in place. Like so. So once we've installed our indicator hub and tightened down that retention bolt there, we can install our mag base with dial indicator. So the first thing we're going to check and adjust is our square. So I'm going to start here at the top. So we can only adjust square and measure square from where our gimbal bolts are. Our gimbal bolts are what adjust our square. So at 12 o'clock here, I'll zero my indicator and slowly move to the opposite side, counting how many thousandths of an inch difference between the two. So between here and the top and the bottom, I am roughly 28 thousandths of an inch difference. So that is a minus 28 thousandths on the bottom, which means that the hub is further from the pipe. So I need to draw this down in towards the bottom. To do so, I'll take my 1/2 inch wrench, I'll loosen the top gimbal bolt, bring my indicator back to the top, and as I tighten the bottom one, I'm going to watch my indicator. So I've got 28 thousandths to move. I only want to move half of that. That'd be a total of 14 thousandths. I'm going to go from 0 to 14 thousandths right there. Before I do anything else, I want to make sure I snug my top gimbal bolt one more time. Check to make sure it stayed on 14. If I didn't, maybe a little bit more tension on the bottom. Okay, there's 14. zero it, and check that movement. I should be at 0 on the bottom. And there's 0. I'm going to do the same thing for the two sides here. Once we've squared within 5 thousandths, we're going to center. So whenever you're setting up any machine, the order of operations is always square, center, square. So once we skip square, we center, and we'll check square one more time. So where we center at is at these parallel offset set screws. Those are 45 degrees offset from the gimbal bolts. So I'll run my indicator on the inside of the pipe to one of those parallel offset set screw locations, zero it, and then rotate to the opposite side, watching my indicator travel. That says plus 30 thousandths of an inch. That means I'm closer to this side by 30 thousandths. So to adjust that, I'll loosen this top set screw, run my indicator to that set screw location, and tighten the opposite by 15 thousandths, half of the total indicator readout. There's 15. I'll tighten the top one more time. Check to make sure I'm still at 15. Zero my indicator. And check my movement. And I am at 0, 0. I'll do the same thing for the opposite too. Once you've adjusted your full function miter manifold to center using the parallel offset screws, you want to make sure that they're all tight. All the parallel offset screws are tight against each other. Double check your center. Total indicator readout around 5 thousandths of an inch. Now we're going to double check our square. Remember, square, center, square. So I'll go back to my top, zero my indicator, run it around to the bottom. And if everything's done right, that shouldn't have moved. I'm still at 0. And I'll check the sides as well. Once you double check your square, you can disassemble, take off your mag base. You can remove the indicator hub. Tighten that jam nut, and you're ready to hang your machine.